Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I, Ken, read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought-terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. Hello everyone, welcome back to Trauma Town. Ken Reads Roast Your Ex. On this particular episode, which is the last episode for the month of November, before we go into the December letter readings, we are going to be talking about yet another follower's experience of dating someone who likely has a severe avoidant attachment style. I should also make a note here that, by the way, if any of you have also dated someone of the opposing attachment style, like a mega anxious attachment, and you want to break it down, please send it through, because I know that a lot of you are trying to demystify the avoidant experience, but if any of you want to balance it out by sharing what it's like to have the opposite experience, you're very welcome to. Anyways, before we get into this, I'm going to invite my colleague and teammate Megan on, because she's going to be joining me unpack this letter, and we will go from there. Who has joined this live, and happy Thanksgiving to those of you in the United States. We don't have that here. We've got our own holiday that comes up much later. Hello, Megan. It's good to see you again, even though we spoke 5 minutes ago.
Good to see you again, too. I'm just waiting for your feed to come through, because I see myself, but you're like a black screen. So I'm just waiting to see your lovely face, even though I saw it 5 minutes ago.
You know what, you may not, because sometimes Instagram just doesn't let you see me. So maybe you'll have to just pretend you'll just have to pretend that I'm here.
Absolutely. I'll visualize you in my head. Oh God, Instagram. Love technology when it works. So
but unfortunately it's also retrograde, so I think that's probably why we're also getting some of the crazy astrological shenanigans.
Yes, I had a friend of mine. I'm not terribly familiar with like the astrological signs and how that kind of works in the universe, but I remember her saying that when this happens, Mercury's in retrograde. She goes, Mercury's in the toaster, like it's in the toaster oven burning and catching fire. So that's what's going on right now. Mercury is in the toaster burning. It's on fire. It's fire. It's a mess. So
so is technology as a consequence. So yay for us.
Yeah.
Alrighty, before we get into this, would you like to introduce yourself for everyone? And then after that, we also need to give an anonymous name to this letter, because we forgot to do that.
We did. Okay. So I'll start with the introduction. So hello, everybody. My name is Megan Brito. I'm a team member with Ken. I am a coach with Ken in Ken Read Counseling. So I primarily work with individuals who have very recently experienced fairly devastating breakup with somebody that struggled with an insecure attachment style. So I help folks recover off the back of those experiences, work through the betrayal they feel, grief of the ending of the relationship. I help folks to work on healing their own respective attachment styles that are insecure, moving to a place of more security. And I also can support people if their previous partner, the relationship that they were in, if their partner struggled with an addiction of some kind, especially ones around things like sex and pornography addictions, I can also help put some context to what happened and explain how the how those addictions or those behaviors impacted the relationship you had. So that's what I do with Ken. I work part-time with Ken as a coach, so that's how you see me in this space. And full-time, I work as a registered social worker with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers, and I provide addiction counseling to folks in my community in rural southwestern Ontario. And I specialize in behavior addictions. So most of my work day, my full-time job, I see a lot of people for things like sex and pornography addictions, gambling, binge eating, hoarding. We call it tech use, but that's like addictions to the internet and your phone, social media, and I see folks for tech use. I do see some folks for substance use too, but yeah, mostly that primarily are the behavior addictions. So that's what I do full-time as a social worker, as a counselor, and I work with Ken as a coach. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Lovely to have you on board because your skill set's very obviously practical, and you obviously read a few of these letters, and you obviously work with a few people on their attachment stuff. So
yes,
I was wondering, just as a throwaway name, why don't we call this person Ingrid?
Sure. All right, I'm gonna write that down so I don't forget. So
perfect. So we're reading Ingrid's letter today, and let's get straight into it. So Ingrid writes, whoops, before I'm on a Word document for this one, so my thumb slipped and I started making typos left, right, and center.
I mean,
right.
I can't see your face, so if you're making typos, I can't see your face. Mercury is in the toaster oven on fire, so it's good. It's great. It's going to be great.
In which case, I can make all the mistakes I want, which is awesome. All right, so
do whatever you want.
Getting into Ingrid's letter. She writes, thanks for taking the time to read my letter and hope you can shed some light on the situation that has been dragging me down for the past year. It started in November where a work colleague and I met during a business dinner. We knew of one another and had previously interacted, but this time round, things got more intimate. There was a clear physical attraction and he had made many attempts to get closer and talk to me. At the end of the evening, it was just us two, and he proposed that we go for a midnight walk around the city. Romantic. He was charming, funny, and this is where we found out that both of us had recently separated and gone through a divorce. By the end of the evening, going through a divorce. By the end of the evening, we kissed and he tried very hard to try and sleep with me. I said no to physical intimacy, but he did come back to my room and we lay in bed talking all night and enjoying each other's company. The next day, I had to fly back home, so we exchanged numbers and continued the conversation. For the next couple of weeks, it was what seemed like the perfect connection. We were getting to know each other, having very deep and intimate conversations, having regular interactions and planning when we were going to see each other next, which was around Christmas time. After the third week, during one of our exchanges, he was teaching me some words in his native language and sending cute voice messages of phrases I could learn. Out of the blue, he sent one that said, "I love you." I was, of course, surprised and did not quite know how to react. He went on to send a 3-minute voice note on how I was the most amazing woman he'd ever met, that God had sent me to show him what a true and healthy relationship could look like. He mentioned how his ex-wife neglected him and he was the main caregiver for his kids. Well, I totally fell for it. And in the moment, I also said, "I love you." The weeks following, the intensity continued, of which he sent me videos of how he would reverse his vasectomy to allow us to have a child together. Now, to note, I have 1 child and he has 4, and he wanted to expand our family. I had previously mentioned my wish for a second child, so for him to say this to me meant a lot, and I thought he was genuine. Yeah, I think he probably was in the moment too. He even booked a trip to New York to come and visit me in my hometown. During this time, we made our relationship exclusive and said he loved being able to call me his girlfriend. He mentioned me to a couple of friends and his brother, but he was very clear that we had to keep things quiet and didn't want anybody to know about us, especially at work. I completely agreed about the work component, but it was a bit strange that he didn't want our family and friends to know about us. So, the relationships in the closet. Should we take a pause here to dissect some of this love bombing stuff that's going on? What are your thoughts, Megan?
So I have this prediction at the end of this letter. Mercury's in retrograde on fire in the toaster oven, and this relationship will also end up there too. This is, I can see this not going well. So yes, lots of love bombing. And hearing that, I think it was the first date that she went on with him, he was very, very eager to have, sleep with her afterwards, have a sexual encounter with her afterwards. And that rushing can be a red flag. I know Ken, and I talk about it too with folks, is it's not like judging people that will rush into things, or like it's not about judging you for sleeping on the first date. It's just recognizing that oftentimes when we rush, 9 out of 10 times it can set us up for an unhealthy relationship that ends up being very traumatic, very painful, because it's not setting a solid foundation of getting to know somebody before we sleep together. Because even when sex is involved, sex doesn't have to be we can have people can have sex without having emotions at the forefront, but they're still there in some capacity. So that was quite, that's rushing. That's a bit of a red flag to me. And then hearing a 3-minute love note of God sent you to me to have this healthy relationship, I also hear that as a bit of a red flag, because if he's saying this is my first healthy relationship, but not talking about what other relationships looked like before, that's also a red flag for me of just the relationship probably not going well, or his level of insecurity. If he's just, I'm going to phrase it as saying it out of the blue and so thankful for it, as opposed to working on skills for himself to create a healthy relationship, to not create a healthy relationship, but to understand what he wants and then to go find one. It's almost like he's phrasing it as if the relationship that he's having with this woman proverbially fell in his lap. So those are some things that are sticking out. And they live in opposite countries, opposite side of the ocean. She's in New York, Ingrid's in New York, he's somewhere overseas. That's what I also hear as well. So yeah, that's my thought so far on this letter.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. But also, can I just pinpoint the whole, I would reverse my vasectomy to have a child with you.
Yes.
On one hand, I want to say beautiful, lovely, great to hear that, because that's, I think a lot of people would die to hear that, because it's how lovely. That seems really, and I think, as Ingrid pointed out, that seemed pretty genuine at the time. And I have no reason to doubt that he was probably feeling that in the moment. I mean, I know you've read ahead, I haven't, but from what I'm reading, I'm there's no reason to believe this guy, is fucking around. It seems to me meaning I don't think he's a player. I feel like that seemed like it came out of a very passionate place.
Yes.
But at the same time, you're so, to be honest, when I think about the idea, if you've had a vasectomy, right, or you're planning on having children in the future, I find it really quite alarming that he's prepared to walk back that decision, because you usually have to put a lot of intention into having a vasectomy if you're truly going to do that. So for him to say to her, I am willing to reverse my vasectomy to have a child with you, that's full on. It's whoa, you're making a huge, you're planning, according to you, to have a life-altering surgery to allow yourself to facilitate having children with me. And we've only known each other for what, a handful of months at this particular stage? And I know they were co-workers, but it doesn't seem like they were working in the same unit together too, which we'll talk about in a hot minute, how he's keeping that in the dark. But I just think that's too much. It's like saying, I'll change, maybe not to this extent, but it's on the realm of, I'll change my religion for you. I will change my house for you. I will change my job for you after knowing this person for like a short period of time. Like, usually those decisions require so much thought, laboring, processing, and thinking. Like, I've got a very close friend, never wanted to get married, and the amount of deliberation that went into her finally acquiescing and being like, all right, I'm going to get married. Like, neither of them, actually, neither her or her partner wanted to get married, but circumstances kind of forced them into it with where they're living at the moment. And it took so much time and effort to be like, do we really want to do this? And they're still debating about whether or not it's, you know, in alignment for them. The point is, you can't just be throwing those big phrases around, because it's pretty impactful to hear that sort of stuff too. Lovely on one hand, but too much too soon. What are your thoughts on that, Megan?
I was going to say, and again, can you see me in this video? Okay. So the face I made when you said, let's pinpoint to the fact that this man said, I will reverse my vasectomy for you. That kind of face I made was like, it was just that, like, holy hot damn, sir. Like, calm down. You barely know each other. And bringing another child into, you know, into the world, even though you already, you know, for him, he already has 4 and Ingrid has 1, but bringing another child into the world, that's not a light decision. And as it's that similar, I see it as a very similar comparison when you talked about your friend that you had that's deliberating about getting married. That is something that is life-changing. That involves another person. And you really, really have to be mindful and deliberate about, is this what you want? And what I hear from this man is, you know, and you said, oh, well, Ken, he was like passionate in the moment. It was such this intense feeling he was having where he said it felt very, I'm going to phrase it as just accurate for him in that moment. And again, I can imagine as the letter goes on, those things are going to change, because also if you are struggling to sit with your feelings, whether you're anxious or whether you're avoidant in those attachment styles, when you struggle to sit with how you feel and then think and process it before you go ahead and jump to any conclusions, you're just going to run with whatever comes to mind for you. Like, you're just going to run with that feeling and then backtrack on it later. So I can imagine that's going to happen shortly. So yeah, it's just, it's so impulsive, and it's so, that's like saying, Ken, you're dying. Ken, you have kidney failure. Like, I'm so sad that that's happening. You can have one of my kidneys, and then 2 weeks from now, I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to keep both of them. I'd like them both to stay in my body. You can go find one from somewhere else. And then you go, awesome, now I'm going to die. Megan was my only chance at living because she felt bad for me that moment, and now she retracted it. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's, yeah.
Yep, I completely agree with you. And as this person also said too, maybe first live in one place before reversing your vasectomy. I couldn't agree more. Mm-hmm. But when we're, you know, this is why I want to just bring up to everyone's attention again, because it's really important. When we think of like emotions, usually the rhetoric that gets thrown around the internet is bad emotions, anxiety, depression, anger, rage, you know, not cool, but you still have to feel them. And it's like, did we forget that enthusiasm, excitement, and euphoria, whilst not being bad emotions, I don't believe emotions being good or bad, they are what they are. Yeah. But it's like, did we forget that the good feeling emotions are also at times, you know, capable of causing our brain to lose about 100 IQ points as well too. Like, I have made some very rash decisions when I'm excited about something, and I haven't taken the time to settle the hell down. And I just think that this speaks to that. It's like that, you know, puppy dog sort of enthusiasm of like, you know, he's panting and being like, oh my God, Ingrid, like, you know, I want to do this with you. This just feels so amazing. It's like, can you just regulate yourself for a hot minute and really just think about not only what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And I feel like for a lot of people who struggle with insecure attachment is they can't sort of at times separate themselves from those big emotions. They get into their big emotion and then they just sort of like feel into it. I can see someone here's asked, will the Q&A box be available? If you got questions, feel free to actually put them in the chat today, because we're going to try and stick to the letter. And if we have time, well, you know, maybe one of us will answer a question, but we're going to try and keep it on topic to this letter reading today. With regards to another thing that I think is highly relevant to this letter, and I know we're hyperfixating on the early stages, but, you know, I tell you what, a lot of the red flags you can often find in the early stages.
Yeah.
Why the hell is he keeping everything quiet about your relationship, right? Like, why does he feel that there's, you know, he needs to hide your relationship, which he's made official with you, right? Why does he want to keep that hidden from his family and from work as well too? Because something about this feels to me like it's less about hiding it from work. It just feels like, you know, he wants to compartmentalize this relationship with you. It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, and Ken, I want to comment on that, or like build on it too. Oftentimes when we are hiding things, so in this case, the context of the letter, hiding the relationship from coworkers, from family, it's not really about the coworkers and the family. It's actually about him hiding it from himself, and not like the relationship, but the feelings he's having around the relationship. He doesn't want to confront how he's feeling because it feels so intense. And you said it earlier too, there's no such thing as a bad emotion, but emotions that feel really intense and overwhelming people can associate as bad. So I can imagine that this man may be feeling, you know, God, probably, I wonder if some type of, at some level, guilt or shame coming up, or worry, confusion, fear, nervousness. And he, like, again, those feelings, these intense feelings he's having of like, oh, reverse my vasectomy, those can come and go. And the underlying nervousness about the relationship that can lead to this, you know, the anxiety that can lead to the breakdown of it, those are the things that he's basically trying to hide from. So if he doesn't have to tell it to other people, he doesn't really have to talk about it that either. Like, I don't know if that was a bit of a ramble, but does that kind of make sense, Ken?
Yeah, no, it does.
Or to other folks?
No, I think what you said was great, because I think you're so right, because there's obviously something here he's not comfortable with. You know,
yeah.
As someone actually, I like this phrase, you know, it's going to be too real when out of the closet. And I know that's usually and we see in like alphabet soup territory, but the thing is that I think that it's appropriate here, because similarly to coming out due to sexuality, coming out due to neurodivergence, you know, all the things that can, you know, feel shameful. It seems like there, as you said, there's a degree of like, why do we need to hide this? And maybe there is a bit of shame around revealing this particular experience. So let's continue, shall we? So the week before Christmas, I was back over for another business trip and was experiencing some travel disruptions and basically ended up stranded in Germany. After speaking to him on the phone about what happened, he told me without hesitation that he would pick me up. He drove 5 hours to Germany to pick me up, and we spent the journey back holding hands, kissing, and being very affectionate. It felt so perfect. A man who cared enough about me to drive across borders to help me. We spent the next couple of days together and were intimate for the first time. He took me back to his hometown for a visit. He would walk the street hand in hand, but I could feel there was a shift in his energy. He was constantly looking around, and when I kissed him goodbye, he would check to see if anyone was looking. For a second, I thought perhaps bringing me here was too much for him, and he was worried friends or family would see us. I didn't place much attention on it and left to catch my flight home. I'm actually going to pause here again, because there's something here which I think is really important. Earlier in the reading, I don't know if a mistake was made, because I think I read out that Ingrid actually didn't have sex with this guy on the first night. I agree with what you were saying, Megan, that if you are going to have sex on the first night, like, fine, it is what it is, but it can be a bit of a rush. But that's a clarification. But what I wanted to talk about was two things. That's really quite sweet, that gesture of him wanting to drive all the way from Germany to be there for you. Like, on one hand, that's really quite, you know, protective, lovely of him to want to go and do that. And, you know, it does seem like what a thoughtful gesture, and also how protective. Like, if you've been someone who's dated, you know, and had disappointing experiences with guys where you felt maybe even throughout your life that you haven't been protected,
that's lovely. But at the same time, something about this feels really intense yet again. It's like, again, he barely knows you. And I mean, for someone to drive 5 hours out of their way to come and see you, I just think this is a bit much. Like, it just sort of feels like, bro, like, I mean, too much too soon is my thoughts on this. What are your thoughts on this, Megan?
I want to echo that as well. And it's the same thing. It's what you were saying, Ken. It is a really, really sweet, lovely gesture that he wanted to drive 5 hours to be there with you. And I think what I'm hearing, and this is just how the letter is written, we're only able to, you know, kind of understand things based on the information that's given to us. And what I'm hearing is that for this man, he's able to affectionately, like, you know, hugs and kisses and, you know, wanting to have sex. So there's the physical aspect, and then like the acts of service. I'm going to drive 5 hours across borders to be there with you, to be there to show you that I care, but actually being able to sit and be vulnerable and talk about how and why he cares and his own thoughts and feelings and fears and hopes and dreams. I'm not hearing that either. So I hear this rush and him trying to be, you know, the physical part of it, and the acts of service are ways he's trying to show that he wants to be there for you, but he can't go deep. So that's my 2 cents on it. Yeah, and this is where it's going to get challenging, not being able to sit with his emotions and share what they are. That's when we see things also just, again, the relationship starting to break down and to degrade.
I completely agree, and I think that's already rearing its head. Like, I mean, like you were saying even before about how, you know, he was trying to keep the relationship under wraps. Isn't it interesting that behavior is rearing its head when they're spending time together? Like, even though they're physically intimate, they're in a goddamn relationship. He's scared from the sounds of it to even acknowledge this relationship. It's like, bro, why are you afraid to be, you know, seen being intimate with a partner in a relationship? Like, it's not exactly like, from what I can understand, straight relationships are something to be scared of. In fact, as far as I'm aware, they're very normalized. But it's just like, what's the hang up here? Like, it seems like I'm feeling like we're getting into red flag city. What are your thoughts? Yeah,
that's the thing. We're getting into red flag city. And you said it, and I know sometimes I feel like I ramble a bit, but you were saying, Ken, really well. What I was trying to get at is he is trying to do everything else, but he's not saying this is a relationship. He's not talking about how he feels. He's not talking about his intentions. Like, saying I love you and saying I would reverse my vasectomy to have another child with you. Those are talking about actions. Like, those are, you know, reversing that vasectomy, that's an action item. I love you. That's like, that is a feeling, but he's not going into it more. He's not going into what's going on for him. Like, someone here, the comments said, 1 foot in 2 worlds, not mentally committed. That's kind of what's going on, right? I like that, right? He's having 1 foot here, 1 foot there, like 1 foot with Ingrid, 1 foot kind of out of it, because he can't be honest with himself and admit, this is why I am pursuing this relationship with Ingrid, or trying to have this relationship, because I'm just not telling myself what's going on. So
yes, and it does suggest to me that there's some stuff he's actually keeping from Ingrid as well too. He's giving.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, I feel like he's giving Ingrid the fun stuff, right? Ingrid describes Ingrid describes, oh, well, this feels deep and intimate, and not to knock you, Ingrid, I'm sure it did feel that way, especially upon reflection, and that's totally fine. But when I'm reading this, I'm like, he's only giving you a part of himself. Like, he's only giving you the part that's easy, that's, you know, accessible, the acts of service, as you put it. But those acts of service, those gestures that he's doing, as this person said, it really sounds like he only wants a sexual situationship and he'll say anything to get that. He was willing to bed her within hours of knowing her, and possibly he could still be married. Yeah, that's actually fair. Now, does that mean that he's a player? I think there's too much emotion in the mix for there to be a player sort of stuff going on. I feel like, you know, to me, this is being led by a lot of impulsivity and irrationality, more than like, I'm going to play this chick and be very strategic about it. Yeah. He seems too much like a ferret who's just looking out for predators every time he's with his partner, to be someone who's, you know, very slick about this. There just seems to me like there's way too much, you know, fear that's going and compartmentalizing that's going on here for this to be something that's sophisticated. It really just seems to me like what I'm reading is he's trying to just like compartmentalize this stuff as someone here says, ooh, shiny. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. In any case, oh, well, this is a great place to continue. Ingrid writes, this is where it all went downhill. Oh, wait, no, maybe that's not what I said. What was it? Oh, no, that's right. This is where it all went downhill. Over the Christmas break, he would slowly distance himself and start to ignore my messages and calls. It really triggered my anxiety, and I was trying to figure out what had happened. The only thing that was going through my head was that he was using me for sex. Well, that's what a lot of us have been saying too. He got what he wanted, and the chase was over. He eventually answered my call on Christmas Day and made it seem like I was crazy for thinking something was wrong, and said I was the one being overdramatic. Wow, what an asshole. He was convincing me he was not a player, and if he wanted to hook up, there were much easier options out there. My reaction made him feel like he was being suffocated and brought back memories from his marriage. He said he had a lot going on and was natural that he would pull away. After getting everything out in the open, I asked him if he still wanted to visit during New Year, of which he replied, well, yes, I already paid for it, but I can have a good time on my own. I would like to spend time with you, but now I'm worried you think I'm just using you. So he started using my own words against me. We spent New Year together, and he acted as if nothing had happened. I was, of course, hesitant, but when we were together, everything felt right. We had the most amazing few days, and he flew back home with both of us feeling positive. But then the roller coaster started again. He became distant and vague in his communications. I once again called him out on his behavior, and this time trying not to be confrontational after what happened, and he came back with a 10-minute video saying that yes, he was pulling back, but actually he did not want to have the fuss surrounding relationships. And it was not that he didn't want a relationship with me, but to have a relationship in general was not what he wanted. I accepted this and we parted ways. But after a few weeks, I stupidly reached out asking how he was and admitted we missed each other. We tried to revive the connection and met once more in person and ended up having sex. Lo and behold, after being intimate, he pulled back again, only to say that we're friends with benefits and that he couldn't give me what I wanted or needed. We should be playing bingo at this stage for attachment styles. The following month, he offered to take me for a dinner for my birthday, and after being intimate once again, you can see a pattern here, he left for a business trip the following day. The days that followed, he would use excuses like his father was ill or there were issues at home that required his attention, and he could not make time for us. Months later, I found out that he met another woman during this trip. Okay, well, we have evidence now of other women. Yeah. Wonderful. I'm going to take a breather. Megan, what are your thoughts on all this?
I was going to say, so I like kind of going like just, you know, comments are coming up and I see that in the comment box, a lot of people are like, yeah, you know, he still has a wife. He's still married. You know, you're like, you know, substituting his wife. And I want to like, and I don't really entertain that stuff. And I know Ken doesn't either, because not every person who is chasing somebody for sex means that they're cheating on their wife. A lot of people that have an insecure attachment aren't cheating on their partners. They oftentimes don't have partners long enough. Like they just bounce from person to person. So I also just I wanted to like share that too. So, and right, he said he's not married. It's not an ex-wife he's cheating on. And because he wasn't defining the relationship in his mind, he said, well, I was kind of also seeing somebody else, but not an ex-wife, where again, sounds like he's going to be breaking up with you know, Ingrid, and moving into this next relationship. But again, he never really defined it. So he's just bounces from person to person. And it sounds like his divorce was already finalized. So him just bouncing from person to person, it's not about him cheating on a wife. It's about him not feeling okay with himself and not being able to maintain healthy relationships moving forward. So that's what he's doing. He's bouncing onto this next person because he feels too threatened to have a secure relationship with Ingrid. So that's my 2 cents on it.
I partially agree. I mean, going back to what I said, I do believe the letter writer, Ingrid, did say he was going through a divorce. So my take is, if he is still going through a divorce, not to dismiss what you said, Megan, it's just that if he is in the midst of a divorce, I would say we've got serious problems now. I would say, to me, I'd say one thing that I'm sensing from this is that whenever there's intimacy between the two of them, like they start getting closer, even with sex, he's pulling away. That's one piece of evidence. The second is we haven't heard anything about there being a divorce that's finalized at this particular point in time. We could only assume. But if he is still going through the motions of it, then yes, he's cheating on his wife. And I believe that there was also some mention here about, let me just make sure I'm not, oh no, I did mention this at the end, you know, found out that he was meeting another woman during his trip. So I will actually agree to some of what the people are saying here, which is there is player-ish stuff going on. There is addiction-ish sort of stuff that's potentially rearing its head. But I feel like this guy is, to use a phrase that you were sharing with me prior to us jumping on, is I feel like he's chasing feelings at this time. Like, the reason I'm hesitating to call him a player is because this doesn't feel slick. It just feels like he's just going, as you said, bouncing from one woman to the next to chase the highs and the freedom. And I think he really gets into his head believing that, oh yeah, but we're not really in a relationship, even though he's saying that, you know, they are. So I think that there's misleading behavior going on. It's definitely deceptive. He's not being openly honest and truthful about letting, you know, all parts of him enjoy a relationship. He just wants the fun and the freedom. And I worry that he's definitely a menace, and I feel like he's being terrible to all these women, including Ingrid. And I think she's absolutely right that there is definitely a pattern of something going on here, and he doesn't want to know. He does not want to own up to it.
Yeah, and I want to echo that back. And I apologize. Thank you for clarifying that earlier in the letter. I thought it was the divorce was like finalized, and he's just now, you know, kind of moving on with his life. So, and again, all we have is that little blurb of he's in the process of it. So again, it could be, it's still, right, it's still, the process is still moving forward with the divorce. But he's just bouncing, right? He's bouncing from relationship to relationship. And if someone is a player, and I know, Ken, you've talked about this before in like previous videos, if somebody is a player, there's intention behind it, and they're able to talk about that with the person they're going into that relationship with, or that interaction with. Like, I'm telling you, this is what I'm doing and why, and he can't do that. So right, it's messy, it's fumbly, and because he can't share what's going on with him, he ends up hurting people in the process as he just bounces from person to person to run from his own pain, whether it's around the divorce, whether it's around past relationships, whether it's around his children, whatever. He's okay when things feel fun, but when they start to get serious, when those, again, the attachment starts to form, he can't, because it goes back into that place of vulnerability, of having to show up for somebody, and he can't do that. It's not fun anymore, so let's just move on.
Yep, exactly. And so Ingrid continues, for the following 4 to 5 months, we would talk to one another on a regular basis, see each other around the office, and would even spend days out together, trying to see if we could maintain a connection through friendship. Okay, so just really quickly, I find it interesting that you guys officially were in a relationship, but you never really, I know there was a moment where you were like, okay, well, the connection's over, but like, I feel like none of you have both actually officially ended this romantic relationship. You're still spending quite significant romantic time, because Ingrid continues to say things would get affectionate and romantic from time to time, but it was always short-lived. It was always me to reach out and to organise when we would meet up when I was in his city for work. During this time, he did mention that he was starting to go to therapy and trying to be a better person. So I thought perhaps things would change. In June, I decided that I couldn't maintain a friendship with him and would always want more. Good on you. I was extremely vulnerable and expressed how I felt about him, asking if we could try again, taking things slow. He was extremely vague in his response, saying how he wanted me in his life but was scared to take anything to the next level. A few weeks passed and he invited me to dinner. He made light conversation, and as the food arrived, he hit me with a bombshell. He said he wanted nothing to do with me and we should part ways. He said I should look for someone else and that nothing would happen between us. I felt sick to my stomach and asked if someone else was in the picture that was influencing this decision. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "No, there is no one specific." I didn't believe a word he said, and my gut was telling me otherwise. I asked to leave dinner early, and he was extremely cold and distant, leaving me crying in the middle of the street. The next day, we were both at work and at a party, and he acted like I didn't exist. I asked to speak to him briefly after I'd calmed down from the evening before, and he changed his view, where he said, "Let's see how things go over summer, and maybe we can reconnect afterwards." This is me taking anything breadcrumb related. I just said yes. The following day, I heard from a work colleague that he had a new girlfriend that lives in Peru that he met during a business trip, which was the same trip I mentioned earlier a few months back. My heart sank because it was all making sense now. My gut instinct was right. He'd been stringing me along the entire time, keeping me at a distance, and when he wanted validation, he knew he could reach out to get it from me. Never at one point did he mention he was in a relationship with another woman. I confronted him about it over the phone, in which he was still denying he was seeing this woman, and said things were early days and he was seeing how things were going. I was more concerned about my health as we had been intimate, and I wanted to know if he was sleeping around with other women. I was so hurt and had nothing left to say and cut contact. All right, just going to take a pause here to address that shit fuckery. Ingrid, I'm so sorry that you've gone through this, because this is terrible. And this to me, I'm going to be honest, this to me is what I would call shit behavior from a player, meaning that when there are players who know what they're doing and they're able to just be very clear and upfront with their intentions and just go from person to person, this is giving players a bad name. And I'll agree with what someone said. There is a bit of narky behavior going on here. Can I make that diagnosis? No. But this is really fucked up. What are your thoughts?
I was going to say, yeah, it's super fucked up, and it is narky behavior, right? We can't diagnose, we can't say if this person has narcissistic personality disorder, but as he was flip-flopping of like, oh, like I'm in this relationship, oh, we're just testing it out, you know, what's going on with Ingrid, what's going on with this new person, it's like he's moving the proverbial goalposts around to just fit whatever narrative works for him. He's just moving them around to make himself feel good about the situation and to justify what's going on. And because he didn't like put this label on it, so to speak, he's like, well, I can just do whatever I want with it, and I can move the goalpost around, shift the story, the narrative to have it suit me. So that's like with this new woman he met in Peru on that business trip. So it goes back to like, you know, if this marriage was is ended, wherever he is in that process, bouncing from person, you know, woman to woman to woman, not being clear about his intentions, not being open and honest with himself as to why, he's running when shit starts to get real.
Yes.
When shit gets real, he doesn't want to deal with it, he can't deal with it. So when it's not fun and fluffy and floofy anymore, he just goes on to the next person. It's like think of Spirited Away. I can't think of those characters, but they're just constantly eating and eating and eating, and it's like they never get full. And that's what he's like, that character, where he's just eating to try and satisfy pain, but he can't. So when it's not satisfying, he moves on. Like this food, this meal isn't satisfying, he moves on to something else. And that meal is that person. Yeah. It's Ingrid. It's now this woman in Peru. And she's going to be victimized. She's going to be a victim of the same situation. So, yeah.
Yep.
It's fucked. Agree. It's fucked.
Yeah, it is fucked. I've got something to add to that. You know, you mentioned Spirited Away. I was going to say, I feel a bit of, you know, the tale of Bluebeard here. Like, I feel as though, you know, he's Bluebeard. Ingrid is the chosen one who's told, basically, don't get too close because you won't like what's here. And every time she gets close, he just eviscerates her by leaving. Now, I know that's not how the tale of Bluebeard goes, but, you know, for those of you that know what I mean, it's like he's left a very ominous sort of compartmentalized part of himself, which really Ingrid needs to know, which is the fact that this guy is not being honest and open with you with everything and his intentions. And to link it to what I can see a follower here has said, I'd say some avoidants strongly hang on to formalisms like, I'm divorcing, so I'm not actually in a partnership right now. To get taken either too. I love that. I agree with that phrase so much. And I think that that's really a great phrase because I think this links to some of the confusion even you and I were having about, like, is he divorced? What's going on? I'd say to that point, it's like this guy is just making up fucking shit just to suit his narrative. Yeah.
Yes. And I was going to say that articulated it well. So that user that said that comment of, like, it's like a formalism, right? Because I was going like, I thought he's divorced already. It's confusing. And again, we read the letter. We're reading this freaking letter, and right, I got confused on it as to, like, well, is he divorced or is he not? So Ingrid, I could imagine how you were feeling, or again, other people in that similar situation, folks that are watching this live, listening to it on Spotify, kind of going, yeah, you know, it's like formalization. I don't know either. And that is deliberate. I think that is very deliberate to, again, right? It's to avoid the shame. It's to avoid having to say it out loud. Like I'll talk about it with my clients, is that when you verbalize what you've been hiding, then it feels like it's real. You know, when we have to talk about the shit that we're suppressing, then we acknowledge it. That's when it really feels real for us. So if he doesn't have to talk about it, acknowledge what he's doing and why, not saying it's logical, and I'm not saying it's okay, but for him, it's not real. It's probably, again, not real for him because he's not acknowledging it.
No, but for him, 2 + 2 = 5. And
exactly.
And as this person said, my ex said, well, I'm divorced in my mind. It's like, bruh, like, come on. Like, you know, to me, you know, it's like a little boy or girl or person, child, who is basically trying to, you know, get away with murder by being like, oh, well, I thought, you know, that the cookies in the jar were meant for me, so that's why I ate them all, and I didn't leave any for anyone else. It's like, no! Like, you can't just get away with that. Like, you know, you can't do that. But to me, when you're an adult, that's not cute anymore. That's fucking painful and punishing, and this behavior is not okay. So anyways, Ingrid continues. In August this year, we reconnected again, in which once again he said he missed me and the small random things would remind him of me. He specifically mentioned that he was not in a committed relationship and continuing to work on himself. He was reluctant at first to reach out to me as he knew it was not fair on me after what happened. But you still did it. Like, what the fuck, bro? During this time, we took things slowly, and he would send me videos and photos of him and his kids every day while on holiday, and regularly reaching out to talk about our day. I asked him if he was being genuine, and he said that because I was being vulnerable with him, it was only fair he was vulnerable and honest with me. We were intimate not long after, and he stayed the night. He'd be super affectionate. We fell asleep holding hands, and during the night, he would pull me closer and kiss me multiple times. But back on the roller coaster we'd go. A week later, he said he wanted to remove the physical component of our relationship and became very distant in communication. I'm laughing at how predictable this is. I'm not laughing at you, Ingrid. I'm just laughing because it's just like, to those of you that have listened to, I don't know, like all the episodes that I've done on this, like, you know, I think that we know this is a bit of a recurring pattern now. Like, I mean, before I continue, like, Megan, I don't know about you, but like, I feel like it's so predictable.
I was going to say, like, that's why, like, if you see me rolling my eyes or chuckling, I want to make it very clear. Same thing, Ingrid, it's not at you. And also, I'm not, like, rolling my eyes at people who engage in this behavior and are watching this live. So it's not like, we're not doing it to, like, judge you as a person. It's the behaviors. It's like, this is all ice cream, and every story is just a bit of a different flavor. That's what's going on. This is a different flavor of ice cream, but it's still ice cream. It's still the same. And yeah, it's all the stories have the same narrative, just a little bit of a different sprinkle of flavor of situation that's unique to the person in that relationship. So, and like, also, I'm thinking about that comment, and I think it was, again, somebody in somebody in the comment section was saying, like, they're like, well, in my mind, I'm divorced. Like, in my mind, it works. That's like, I'm sitting here drinking a bottle of Diet Pepsi. So when I drink this, in my mind, I weigh 120 pounds and I'm a size 4. So must be true. Like, what the hell? It's the logic is asinine. The logic is not. There's not there. It's just crazy. And what is this man doing to work on himself? I'd love to know if she touched on that, because I don't have the letter in front of me, and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, did he talk about what he's doing? Or again, is it like, in my mind, I'm working on myself, so I must be. That's like me saying, like, in my mind, if I think I'm funny, I must be Mickey Mouse. I don't know.
He said he was going to therapy earlier, so, but as you and I both know, and that's why I chuckled when I saw that line, I was like, someone saying they're going to therapy means absolute diddly squat. Yeah, so I've said it before in a live too, and I'm going to say this respectfully. If you say you are going to therapy, or someone you're dating says you're going to therapy, and you are not leaving the office reflecting, going, we brought up stuff that may be uncomfortable, actually, like, doing the work, that means fuck all. You are wasting your money. You are wasting your time. If you go to just going to therapy, going to counseling, going to coaching, and if you're not actually doing stuff with that and leaving, like, a little bit uncomfortable and reflecting and actually working on the changes that are not fun and pleasant in the process, you're doing nothing of service to yourself. No. It is pointless. It's pointless. And even at that point. And I mean, like, a great example of that, to those of you that watched the reel I put out today, where I stitched Mike's content, and for context, Mike is a recovering fearful avoidant. He was even saying, when I was midway through my therapy journey, I was still behaving very avoidant with things that I was going through. And so it's why, it's really important just to reiterate that just because you're in therapy, A, doesn't mean anything. B, you might be working on something not necessarily to do with the attachment issue in that particular moment. You might be just discussing it at a peripheral level. I'm sure if you've been on social media enough, you'll have heard of the dangers of intellectualizing your trauma and your mental health. And there's value in understanding why that's dangerous, because you're not doing anything of practical value. I don't mind a bit of intellectualizing, because we do need to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But the point remains that it's not necessarily going to elicit the change. And to be fair to you, Megan, your reaction was actually kind of priceless, because it's like, you were saying, like, what work is this guy doing? Like, I don't remember him mentioning any work, because that's exactly right. It's like, this guy is still continuing to, boomerang with Ingrid. And you know what really bothered me was, he said, I felt bad for the idea of reaching out to you because I was worried it would hurt you, yet he still did it. It's like, bro, that is the definition of abuse. This is not okay.
Yeah, and I'm just like, oh my Jesus. And again, looking at the comments, someone said here, I truly wish that there was a way to hold these people accountable. Shame is such a powerful emotion, and maybe there could be an opportunity to force some self-awareness if he was called out. So when we think of self-awareness, the phrase, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, I think is a perfect way to talk about trying to force self-awareness. When people become self-aware, they're able to, I'm going to phrase it as almost like opening up some space within themselves to be able to reflect and go, gee, things I am doing are hurting myself or hurting other people, and I can reflect on where did this start? Where's this coming from? Why am I doing it? So we can never force self-awareness on people, unfortunately. That's something that you do have to come to your own conclusion with. And when people come in office, whether it's therapy, counseling, coaching, we'll spend time revisiting the same topic over and over and over again before that self-awareness will click in for somebody. So self-awareness is a journey that you have to go through and experience life and just go through shit before you can get there. But when we talk about accountability, recognizing that the relationship's probably going to be done over, and they're going to be 4 people, 4 new people deep before 4 or 5 people before, anything happens. That's not actually a number. I'm just kind of making something up random here, but they're going to be several people ahead of you before they hit a level of like possibly hit a level of self-awareness. We think about accountability, we're also going to have to look at that differently. Sometimes accountability may not have that person who hurt you involved, but how can we hold accountability for them? Maybe not allowing ourselves to be in a relationship like we were in. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does. And
accountability looks different.
I agree. I know, and just to add to what you were saying, I did some research into this a while back about bringing abusers into the light and basically forcing them to reflect on their behavior. And there was an interesting study on how small community towns in Australia, and it was based actually out of what they do in Africa, in that some tribes will come together with the problematic person involved, and they'll gather around and be like, right, we know what you did, was wrong, and we love you, but you've got a choice. Your choice is either to recognize that you've done something wrong and to work on yourself, or we're going to boot you out of here. And apparently that did show signs of having positive change, but from what I've gathered, the studies on that are limited, and what we do know about change from individuals like this who aren't actually ready for change is that it's very, what I would call, superficial. I'm sure many of you who've dated individuals who are severely narcissistic, what am I talking about? Sorry. People who are narcissistic, people with a severe avoidant attachment style, people with a severe anxious attachment style, people who are basically being told to their face, if you do not change, if you do not improve, I will leave this relationship. Usually what happens is they'll give you some superficial change in the beginning to just be a bit of lip service, to just stick around, but they can't sustain it because they're not actually dealing with the core issues that are there. They might give you a new earring. They might take you out to dinner and tell you, I'm so sorry. Write you a letter about how much you mean the world to them too. But all of that is still performative. It's all acts of service sort of stuff too. And it's not really good. Anyways, let's wrap up Ingrid's letter. She writes, I finally decided to get everything out on the table and truly express how this whole experience made me feel. I was getting sick and tired of the mixed signals and became clearer that I was a placeholder for affection and he was benefiting from having me at arm's length, yes, and controlling the dynamic of this relationship, absolutely. He got very defensive and annoyed for me bringing this up, saying, it is what it is, and he didn't want to talk about it, adding that there was no bad blood on his side. Oh, God. He admitted that he'd been chasing a feeling, bouncing from women to women, and felt he didn't have to tell me about the other woman because he was realizing his life was going nowhere. Wow. We're going to come back to that. He went on to say how I deserved better and could not be genuine with myself, let alone be genuine with anyone else. After breaking my trust, I have no idea if he was being truthful, but from then on, I decided I was not going to get back on this roller coaster. There's been no contact since. Good on you. I look back and feel embarrassed in how naive I was in this situation and my clear lack of boundaries, but it became clear that he liked the attention, not me as a person. I'm now moving forward and working on my own anxiety and building future healthy connections. Ingrid, if that's what you got out of this, I'd say you did a fucking great job. Well done for you. But let's go back to what he said, which is that it is what it is. He admits that he's been chasing a feeling, bouncing from women to women, and he felt he didn't have to tell any of the women about what was going on because he realized his life was going nowhere. What a see you next Tuesday. Like, seriously, no, you can't just do that to people. That is so wrong.
No. I was going to say, like, Jesus God Almighty. Oh my God. That, going back to that analogy you made earlier in the live today, saying it's like a little kid who ate all the cookies out of the cookie jar, and they're like, well, they were so delicious. I ate them all. And gee, I don't know why my stomach is upset. It's like, it's that same logic. He's admitting that he was chasing a feeling. He just is continuing to do this. He has no ability to sustain a healthy relationship, probably why his marriage broke down. Just a guess. But that's probably why his marriage broke down. He can't sustain that, and he's just chasing feelings to avoid his own pain, and no accountability was taken for the damage done. Just because you admit what you're doing doesn't mean you hold accountability. All you're doing is saying what you did. Holding accountability is going, how did my actions affect you, and what should I do different? What can I do to help resolve this that you need from me? And also, I will not repeat these behaviors again. That's what it really means to hold somebody accountable. And oh yeah. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on this. Yeah. It's just fucked up. I'm so sorry, Ingrid. Yeah. I'm so sorry you went through this. I really am.
I agree with you. Like, I want to just echo what another follower has said here. Basically, he's saying, don't be mad at me because my life is going nowhere. It's like what? Like, I mean, what in the actual fuck is that? I mean, the mind-bending logic some of these people will go to is just insanity. Again, if I was working with a client who presented this way, I'd be talking to them very differently.
Yes.
I'm not a counselor when I'm on here. I get to talk differently. As far as I'm concerned, Ingrid, you didn't deserve this. This is bullshit. Like, this is just so bullshitty. And I just think that it's such a cop-out. Like, I mean, okay, if your life is going nowhere, get your shit together. It doesn't give you a right to fuck up other people's lives. It's so not okay. And I think that, what a rationalization as well, too. I just think it's insane to me how someone truly thinks that just because my life is a piece of shit, I have the right to just have my cake and eat it with people that I, connect with. They don't need to know the full truth. I just don't think they need to know. It's like, you can't do that to people. So it's not okay. I know one of the people here who's been commenting, I know for a fact, because they've told me, they have what they describe as like military style no contact, which I could only assume means they're not letting even a single breadcrumb penetrate their boundaries, which I love the sound of. And I just want to repeat some of the things they're saying, which is, I think that in an ideal world, there would be more justice for people who've come off the back of these experiences.
Yeah.
There'd be way more, I would love it if there was more accountability that we could have for these people. And, if I go to my grave where people have, institutions have risen up and been like, right, we actually need to have some regulation around dating because it's causing intimate partner violence and trauma. That would be like, for this sort of stuff, I'd say I can go to my grave and be like, fan-fucking-tastic. Because even though, and I know you and I have talked about this, Megan, at length, like, even though this may not be seen as traditional domestic violence, it's still damn violence.
Yeah. Neglect is a form of abuse. Not all neglect is abuse, but when it spills into the neglect that the other person is doing to maintain an upper hand in a relationship, so that's the control of the space, when I see you, what I share with you, if I'm deliberately withholding information about myself that could affect how you behave in this relationship, meaning whether or not you choose to stay with me or not. If I'm withholding that information to limit you from how you want to go about this, that's abusive. That is a form of abuse. And I also heard a lot of that. So, right, we were talking about it earlier in this live of this letter reading of him not wanting to admit to himself what he's doing. Because again, it's, again, metaphorically, but having to say it out loud means it's really true. Like, that's how the brain can work at times, having to admit what he's doing. And because inside he knows that if he has to say, if he has to say it out loud, that also means he's expected to have some type of accountability, and he is also not ready for that. So that withholding piece, I see a lot of that abusive behavior coming in. That's one of the worst. Psychological and emotional abuse is more damaging and long lasting than physical abuse. So, yeah.
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 I think what's wild too to realize is that the effects of being banished like this by an intimate partner is so painful. And I think it goes to your point about how even though it's not physical, like when you're, basically removed to the ether and there's no justice for these people with what they've done. And you know what's worse too, and I mean, this is covered in, I know the book you're reading, Avoidant Abuse, this behavior gets normalized. Like I saw someone the other day basically saying, oh, this is normal behavior. Stop calling this abuse. I'm like, that's the damn problem. We've normalized this behavior and made it seem like, oh yeah, well that just happens to everyone. It's like, good Lord, if it's happening to everyone, we've got so many traumatized people who've been impacted by this and think it's okay. It's like when people realize, oh shit, what I went through in childhood, school, whatever it was actually traumatic. It's like, yes, it was. Why are we accepting this as being okay? And I really think society needs more of a wake-up call when it comes to these forms of covert abuse, because this sort of behavior, it's so easy for a well-intentioned friend member to go like, oh, well, they were just a player. Or like, that's just how dating is. You just get hurt in dating. It's like, no, you shouldn't be ever in this situation.
Mm-hmm. And also, I forgot to mention this earlier too for folks, if this is like your first time joining a live. So for me with my work, for a number of years, I actually worked frontline in the field of domestic violence. So I worked primarily with like women and children fleeing domestic violence. And when people think about domestic violence or abusive relationships, people think of the physical stuff. People think of people throwing things and swearing and threatening to end somebody's life. But all kidding aside, more often than not, the women and children that would come into in this case, it was the shelter I worked at, to flee an abusive relationship because they didn't have anywhere else to go, were experiencing covert forms of abuse, the neglect, withholding, stonewalling, the complete lack of care, and they had nowhere else to go. So those forms of covert abuse bring people into shelter. Those forms of covert abuse are real, they're legit, but because covert is quiet, it's hard to put your finger on, it's very sneaky. That's also a big reason why people don't understand it's abusive, because it can be silent, quiet, hard to pick up, and our society is normalizing it. So we don't talk about it enough, but I can confirm so many people leave abusive relationships out of nowhere else to go and end up in shelters and have to do so much work around violence when it's centered around covert abuse. And what people normalize is like, well, they were just, they're just a player. They're just, oh, they were a crappy partner to you, get over it and move on. No, these are forms of abuse.
Yeah. And to add to what you said, two things to mind, which is, going back to what we said at the beginning of this letter, when this guy was saying, I'd have, lest we forget, I'm reconsidering my vasectomy and I'm thinking of potentially, going through life-altering surgery to have more kids, to be with you. I do believe this guy meant every word he said in the moment. So that's what adds to these complex situations too, right? Is like, I think they mean what they say in the moment, but they're not really thinking about the long-lasting damage it has to people to actually receive that. And it's so interesting when I hear accounts of avoidant attachers who've also been on the receiving end of avoidance, because it's been a massive slap in the face a lot of the time, where they've realized, holy shit, I've been, causing problems. Some others won't. Like, one thing I love about a lot of the avoidant attachers that come to my page is a lot of them will often say that there was some recognition that there was some hurt that they were doing to another person, and I imagine in a positive moment of shame, they realized, oh yeah, I can't let this continue. This is not okay. And so it's wonderful when that stuff kicks in. But when you're dealing with people like this guy, it's problematic because this behavior then, as we've said, gets normalized, and he's not, being held accountable for it as well too. But the other thing as well is it's also different from covert narcissism. As someone who's actually witnessed covert narcissism play out, and that's a topic for another day, but I have to say, severe avoidance will give covert narcs a run for their money in terms of covert violence, because often I find covert narcs are more about blame. They're more about, my life is terrible and nothing ever gets better, and they're winning the victim prize at the Olympics. But when it comes to avoidance, yes, there can be a bit of that victimhood mentality, but even though there might be a degree of blame, they're so much more subtle about how they deflect and how they, talk about this sort of stuff too. And it comes out in very sneaky ways where you just don't expect it. And it's usually centered as things are getting more intimate, whereas that covert narcissism can usually be playing out, sometimes over time. You might see bits and pieces of it, and it feels like you're with, a black hole for a partner. It's not quite the same presentation.
Yes, Ken, you hit the nail on the head with that. Like, yes, 100 out of 10. Yes, absolutely. And the thing that I also see that's differentiating between covert narcissism versus somebody with a severe attachment wounding that's playing out is that someone with that severe attachment wounding playing out, they have a lot of discomfort when they're called out, and they're kind of like, oh yeah, like maybe that's what's going on. Or they'll kind of in a way circle back and go, I kind of had some awareness and I didn't feel great about it. But covert narcs, they will double down, dig in their heels. No, it really is your fault. And no matter what, you can show the evidence, and they will say, yeah, like, whether it's, I don't know, text messages about an exchange, or I know you saw this person, or whatever, they will double down and go, no, this never happened, you're wrong, or I did this because it is your fault. No ownership, and they dig in more, and they don't back down. They don't back down from it. Dr. Ramani talks about that too. That's a other big distinguishing factor with covert narcs versus somebody that has just a really, really severe insecure attachment style.
Yep.
So,
and look, both can overlap, and I've talked about the overlap actually.
For sure.
I talked about an overlap once where it was blatantly obvious in an episode with Amy, but it was like there was just so much other stuff going on where you're like, oh yeah, it's more offensive behavior. It's not just defensive. It's not just, for example, it's not just the fear of intimacy stuff. It's like a tropical storm. You could be having a great day, and then all of a sudden the partner just finds ways to ruin it for you too by making it all about them. You could be organizing a birthday for them, and then they find ways to ruin it by, blaming you for inviting people around who they don't like. It's the moments where you feel like everything's going really well, and then all of a sudden they pull the rug out from underneath you and start getting angry at you out of nowhere. It's a very different style of behavior, which is not to say, again, avoidance can't be covert narcs. They absolutely can, but it's a very... It's just not quite the same thing. And I think that at the end of the day, kind of going to what you and I were saying before we jumped on, I know a lot of people do look for answers online to be like, is this A, is this B, is this C? But eventually I think you'll get to a stage where we could autopsy this till the day the cows come home, but you'll probably get to a stage where you just hopefully realize it doesn't matter what we call it, this behavior just wasn't okay.
Yeah. Yep. Right. What I phrase with my clients are like, I don't give a fuck face. we could analyze it. The cows come home. You can become a PhD expert in attachment styles. You can know the ins and outs, analyze how it affected you, but you're going to hit that point where you go, I don't give a fuck about what pain they were in, the trauma they experienced, why they're doing what they're doing. They hurt me, and how they behaved was not okay. I am mad about how they behaved. I'm upset about how their actions affected me. That's that I don't give a fuck anymore stage that we get to. And we get to it, and then that becomes so free. It becomes freeing. It moves us into our next stage of healing, where we get to take back that ownership too and go, what do I need? I'm not tolerating that again. Well, and then why did I tolerate it? What was it that kept me in this relationship?
Yep. Completely agree. So just rounding out here, I was going to say, I don't have time, unfortunately, to answer that question that someone's thrown in the chat. It's a good one.
Yeah.
But just to I will say, Ingrid, thank you very much for your letter. I'm really sorry that you went through this experience, but I think it's a good letter to just reiterate the importance of, gaining knowledge of this sort of stuff, having boundaries. Mm-hmm. And it's, again, another great example of something that sounds very classic, to be honest, that we've talked about many times before. Just as we're rounding out, Megan, is there anything that you would like to say before we finish?
Yeah. So if folks found this live helpful, previous lives I've done with Ken, the lives I've done with Ken are all about the letter readings. I do have space for clarity calls and for clients. I work as a coach with Ken Mondays and Tuesdays. So I'm Canadian. I live about 2 hours away from Toronto. So it's Eastern Standard Time. So if you're wanting to connect for coaching, have a clarity call for kind of like a vibe check, I do have availability in my schedule. And I'd love to connect with folks. And I always enjoy coming on. I hope that people found this helpful in their own healing too. And Ingrid, thank you for sharing your letter with us. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to read it. And I do hope that you're continuing to heal and find some peace off the back of this experience that you should never have gone through in the first place.
Yeah, completely agree. And I can see someone here's asked, am I taking more letters? I'm happy to answer that, because literally in 1 minute now, I am. I'm literally just about to hop off this, open the submissions off for accepting lives. Letters, I mean, not lives. And just to reiterate, they can be 500 to 2,000 words. If you would like to submit one, feel free to do so with the link that I'll put up on socials, and there's an email that should have gone out now to those of you that have subscribed to the newsletter. And it's 125 Australian dollars to submit, and there won't be as many openings and availabilities for December because I'm going to be away for a large part of it. But then when I come back in, and look, if I have any spillover, that's fine. I'll sort it out and I'll find ways to get through them. But Megan and I will be continuing to obviously do our respective client work. We'll come back for letter readings. We'll do, more of these every now and then. So thank you to everyone who is here. I can see someone here said, oh no, what if I haven't written it yet? Haha, can I pay for it first and then send it? My recommendation to you would be email me now and just let's chat about it. And I'll give you an invoice. And if you can try and submit that before the end of the week, which is tomorrow for most of you, but also today for those of us on the other side of the world, that would be ideal, because then I can guarantee you a time. Otherwise, you can always send it to me in January, so there's no rush. It's not like we're not going to do letter readings in the new year, unless all of a sudden people stop dating avoidance, which I don't think is going to be an issue anytime soon.
That's not a New Year's resolution. No, that's still going to happen. It's still going to be out there.
Yeah, the avoidant cases, I dare say, are going to continue. If you look at, people that are online, it's just like that. Someone